So throughout the beta and even after the beta, there was a pretty common consensus that there were two classes out of the five that felt a little tougher to play or simply level up, and that is the Barbarian as well as the Druid. Now, there are a lot of things to say about the Druid. One thing is that we couldn't even get access to their class bonuses in the beta. Who knows if they are more late game oriented due to how their skill tree is set up. But that doesn't actually concern me. To me, I actually think that the Barbarian has caused somewhat of a rift, potentially, in balance, not only because of how their early game is balanced, but what they could become upcoming, which is why I think a lot of people felt like the Barbarian was a little weaker earlier on into the game, coupled with the fact that they are melee, and you have a powerful formula for potentially a somewhat unenjoyable early game class, but an absolute broken mess later on in the game. So why is there this concern for the Barbarian? Well, there's two reasons for it. One, I would very much like to see Blizzard give melee classes either something within their kits, which I'll say is very difficult to do for the Barbarian, or to rebalance these melee based encounters, which makes them feel poor. Because if you have a game and someone wants to play the Barbarian and they load up and they play the initial 10 levels, or maybe they want to play a build that isn't the best build, like Thorn's Barb or potentially Upheaval Barb. Maybe they just want to play a Whirlwind Barb build, and unfortunately they don't have the proper setup for it, and they find it to be very lackluster, which is absolutely going to happen. They may end up just leaving the game in the moment. So having properly balanced early game classes is extremely important. Now with something like the Druid, I think it's easier to balance, again, with just giving them a little bit extra power potentially in their numbers, or potentially just, again, giving them something additional since they are a little weaker in the early game. However, by doing that with the Barb, you end up in a nightmare to balance, because they actually have something insanely unique to their class mechanics. They actually have two insanely stackable mechanics. The arsenal system provides you with 4 separate weapons, 2 two-handeds and 2 one-handeds, which all apply legendary aspects, and they all stack regardless of what weapon you're using at the time. Add to this their actual stacking mechanic of each weapon, providing something additional on top of that, and you have something that's going to be potentially absolutely insane for the future of this game. Again, if you compare this to other class systems, like for example the Sorcerer's Enchantment system, which gives you 1, potentially 2 bonuses later on in the game that give you, unique mechanics, potentially like a free Chain Lightning or a free Hydra, or if you compare that to the Rogue's combo points, which gives you, potentially like 60% damage along with their specializations, or the Druid's class ability, which granted we don't have much information on, so I can't really speak to a whole lot, or even the Necromancer's summon ability. The Barbarian is completely out of their league. Now I actually have the video pulled up where I did a maxed Barbarian guide. Barbarian was the first class that I maxed in the beta, and I went in depth into the arsenal system, kind of what their class is capable of. I went over all their skills, and again, I show you this because you could see here my character currently has 2 two-handed legendaries and then 2 one-handed rare weapons or yellow weapons equipped. Now, as we approach later on to the game, you are going to be able to stack a ton of aspects on the Barb. Now, normally with the arsenal system, as we will see, if we go through the skills here, you can actually see that each skill has the potential to use a weapon. Several different weapons, in fact. For example, in this specific skill, Rend, if you decide to go ahead and use dual wield, you'll use the 2 one-handeds. If you decide to use a two-handed, you'll use the two-handed sword or slashing weapon that you have in your, kind of layout right here, or loadout. Now, what's interesting is this is a really cool mechanic. However, there's something that's really different about this mechanic that normally isn't applied, and that is you don't just use the legendary aspect of one of your weapons, whatever weapon you're using, use them for all of your skills, meaning all legendary weapons apply to all of your skills. Now, for a game that's an ARPG, and specifically the Diablo series, is all about multiplier stacking. You have barrier increasing damage. You have potentially, as I was highlighting over here, this ground stop that's going to deal 24% increased damage when you're standing in it, which is insane. Or even this other weapon, which gives you extra core skill damage every single time you have maximum fury. You're going to get 180% core skill damage. Again, if you add all these together, you're going to be multiplying and multiplying and multiplying and multiplying all these different weapons together. Now, there's actually another interesting mechanic to this, which is that not only are you getting these legendary aspects and it's all multiplying the damage, you also have the arsenal system, the weapon expertise system, which actually gives you more bonuses, right? For example, with the two-handed sword, if you decide to run a bleed build, you actually get 30% increased bleeding damage every single time you kill an enemy for 5 seconds. So now you have 4 legendary aspects, which, by the way, two-handed weapons are essentially 2 one-handed weapons in terms of power of the legendary aspects. So now you can run 2 of your most important legendary aspects on two-handed weapons, which is going to be insane. Again, if you consider this and compare it to, like, let's say the Druid. Well, the Druid has the landslide legendary aspect, and on a one-handed weapon it doesn't really do a ton in terms of the power of it, right? But when you put on a two-hand, it's almost twice as powerful. So now you can have two times as powerful legendary aspects. Add on to that the additional stats or mechanics that you're getting from the expertise system, and you end up with a very potent combo. Now, why do I even mention all this? Like, why is this important? Well, there's been a lot of talk about increasing the power of the Barb potentially, increasing what they have in terms of the early game experience. But the problem with that is that if you're going to buff the early game experience, the only options you truly have are to rework how melee classes work, or to increase their base skill value. If you do that, then now you have a problem where your base skill value is increased, and yet as you increase on later in the game, you're going to be multiplying that base skill value even further, way more so than any other class in the game because of their arsenal system. This is potentially a very dangerous mechanic. And I think that Barbarian is the real class that could truly break Diablo 4, depending on how it's balanced. Now, there are obviously a lot of different solutions and potential paths that you can take, and I'm very curious to see what they have to say, and potentially I might dive into how I would rebalance the Barbarian. But I think it's actually an interesting discussion, and one that I wanted to share with you all, because a lot of people seem to look at the Barb and say, yeah, they're a little bit weaker in the early game. Yes, there's some builds. And while I do think every class should have a really easy early game experience, in fact, the whole leveling experience should be relatively easy on the base difficulty, which, it's not that bad, to be honest. And yet, some people are calling for immediate buffs for the Barbarian, which I think is probably a little premature, and we have to see what it shapes up to in the future. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below. Again, I think this is an interesting discussion to have about the Barbarian, because I think it's the one class that truly has the potential to do some insane things that no other class can do. Thanks for watching. If you guys enjoyed Diablo 4 content, be sure to sub to the channel. Be sure to like the video if you enjoyed it, because I'll be back for more Diablo 4 content tomorrow.